The planet Veloria was one of the most powerful worlds in that part of the galaxy. Its cities were filled with shining towers, advanced technology, and busy spaceports where ships from many star systems arrived every day. The Velorian Empire had ruled the surrounding regions for centuries, and many civilizations respected its strength and wisdom. At the center of Veloria's capital stood the Royal Palace, a massive structure made of bright crystal stone and silver metal. From the outside, it looked like a glowing mountain rising above the city. Inside the palace, hundreds of royal guards protected the halls, while advisors and nobles discussed important matters of the empire. The ruler of this powerful world was Queen Aralyth. She was known as a strong and intelligent leader who had guided her empire through many difficult years. But even though she ruled one of the greatest civilizations in the region, there was a quiet sadness in her life that no one could ignore. Many years ago, the queen had lost her only daughter. Princess Lyriana had once been the brightest hope of the Velorian Empire. She was brave, curious, and loved exploring distant star systems. When she was young, she often traveled with research missions to learn about new planets and civilizations. One mission changed everything. Nearly 10 years earlier, Princess Lyriana had been traveling aboard a royal exploration ship near the outer regions of Velorian space. The mission was supposed to be simple. The ship would visit a distant star system, collect scientific data, and return home. But the ship never returned. The royal fleet searched for months. Hundreds of ships scanned asteroid fields, empty planets, and forgotten trade routes. Every signal in that region of space was investigated, yet no sign of the princess was ever found. Some believed the ship had been destroyed by pirates. Others believed it had been lost during a navigation accident. A few people hoped the princess had survived somewhere in deep space, but as the years passed, hope slowly disappeared. Eventually, the Empire accepted the painful truth. The princess was gone. Queen Aralyth rarely spoke about her daughter after that. She continued ruling the empire with strength, but the palace had never felt the same. The halls that once echoed with the laughter of the young princess had become quieter. Many people believed the story of Princess Lyriana had ended forever, until one strange morning. It began with a small alert at the royal spaceport outside the capital city. A single unidentified ship had entered Veloria's atmosphere without sending a diplomatic signal. The vessel was small and old, nothing like the powerful starships that normally visited the royal world. Royal defense systems immediately tracked the ship as it slowly descended toward the palace landing area. Several guards moved into position around the landing platform while palace officers tried to identify the vessel. The ship finally touched the ground with a soft, metallic sound. For a moment, nothing happened. The guards waited carefully with their weapons ready. Then the ship's door slowly opened. A woman stepped out. The guards immediately froze in surprise. Even after 10 years, they recognized her face. It was Princess Lyriana. And the news spread through the palace within seconds. Servants, advisors, and guards rushed toward the landing platform, unable to believe what they were hearing. Some thought it was a mistake. Others wondered if it was someone who simply looked similar to the missing princess. But when the woman walked down the small ramp from the ship, there was no doubt. The princess had returned. However, something about the scene confused everyone watching. Princess Lyriana was not alone. Standing beside her were two young human children. A small boy held her left hand. A little girl held her right hand. The children looked around the landing platform with curiosity, while the royal guards stared at them in shock. Humans were not common visitors to Veloria, especially children. None of the guards understood what they were seeing. Where had the princess been all these years, and why had she returned with two human children? Inside the palace, Queen Aralyth received the message from the spaceport. At first, she believed it was some kind of mistake. For many years, she had trained herself not to believe rumors about her daughter's survival. But the message came from trusted royal officers. The princess had truly returned. Within minutes, the queen walked into the grand throne hall where the royal court had already gathered. The massive doors opened slowly as Princess Lyriana entered the chamber with the two human children still holding her hands. The entire hall fell silent. Nobles who had once known the princess stared in disbelief. Some of them had watched her grow up in these same halls. Now she stood before them again after 10 long years. And Queen Aralyth slowly stepped down from her throne. For a moment she simply looked at her daughter, as if trying to make sure this was not a dream. "Lyriana," the queen whispered softly. The princess nodded gently. "Yes, mother." Emotion filled the throne hall, but the queen's attention quickly moved to the two children beside her daughter. They were clearly human, small, curious, and completely calm. The queen looked at them, then back at her daughter. Her voice carried across the silent hall. "Where have you been all these years?" Princess Lyriana looked down at the children holding her hands. For a moment she did not speak. Then she raised her eyes and answered with a quiet sentence that confused the entire royal court. "They saved my life." The throne hall of the Velorian palace had never been so silent before. Hundreds of nobles, advisors, and royal guards stood perfectly still as they watched the woman who had once been the lost princess of their empire. For 10 years they had believed Princess Lyriana was gone forever, yet now she stood in front of them again, as if time had simply paused and then continued. Queen Aralyth slowly walked forward from her throne. Her eyes were fixed on her daughter's face, studying every detail carefully. Lyriana looked older now, stronger in some ways, but also calmer than the curious young princess who had once explored the palace halls. The queen could see the years of experience written quietly in her daughter's expression. But what confused everyone most were the two human children standing beside her. The young boy and girl looked around the throne hall with wide, curious eyes. And everything inside the palace must have looked enormous to them. The shining crystal pillars, the tall ceiling filled with glowing lights, and the long rows of alien nobles staring down at them created a scene unlike anything they had probably seen before. Yet the children did not look afraid. Instead, they stood close to Lyriana, holding her hands as if they trusted her completely. Queen Aralyth finally stopped a few steps away from them. For a long moment, she did not speak. The queen, who ruled one of the most powerful empires in the region, suddenly looked less like a ruler and more like a mother who had just found a lost child. "Lyriana," she said softly again, almost as if she still could not believe the moment was real. Princess Lyriana stepped forward slowly and bowed her head respectfully. "I am sorry it took so long to return. Mother." The words filled the hall with emotion. Several nobles quietly lowered their heads, remembering the years of searching that had followed the princess's disappearance. But the queen quickly turned her attention to the children. Her voice became steady again as she asked the question that everyone in the hall wanted answered. "Who are they?" Lyriana gently squeezed the hands of the two children before speaking. "This is Eli, and this is Mara," she said calmly. The children looked up when they heard their names. Eli, the boy, was perhaps 8 years old. His dark hair was slightly messy, and he looked around the room with quiet curiosity. Mara, the younger girl, stood a little closer to Lyriana and held her hand tightly. Queen Aralyth looked carefully at them. "They are human," she said. Lyriana nodded. Yes." A quiet wave of whispers spread across the court. Humans were not unknown in the galaxy, but they were still considered a young species compared to ancient civilizations like Veloria. Many nobles had only heard stories about humans through trade reports or diplomatic messages. Seeing two human children standing inside the royal palace was something no one had expected. Queen Aralyth looked back at her daughter. You said they saved your life, the Queen said slowly. Lyriana took a deep breath. Yes. The Queen's expression became serious. Then you must explain everything. The princess nodded again. For several seconds, she remained silent, as if organizing years of memories into a story that could be understood. Finally, she began. When my ship was attacked 10 years ago, we were traveling near the outer systems beyond Velorian space. The attack came without warning. Our engines were destroyed before we could escape. The court listened carefully. The crew launched emergency pods, but most of the ship was already damaged. My pod drifted for several hours before it crashed on a distant planet. Several advisors exchanged concerned looks. The outer systems were known for being dangerous and unpredictable. Lyriana continued, speaking calmly. The planet was harsh. The environment was difficult to survive, and my emergency supplies were almost gone after the crash. Queen Aralyth felt a tightness in her chest as she imagined her daughter alone on an unknown world. But the planet was not empty, Lyriana said. The entire hall leaned forward slightly. There was a human colony there. A louder wave of whispers moved through the nobles. Humans had established colonies across many distant systems, but it was unusual for a Velorian royal mission to encounter one so far from known trade routes. Lyriana continued explaining. The humans found my escape pod before I even recovered from the crash. They did not know who I was. To them, I was simply an injured traveler. She looked down at the children beside her. They took me into their colony. They treated my wounds. They shared their food and gave me shelter. Queen Aralyth listened quietly. For years, she had imagined terrible possibilities about her daughter's fate, but the truth sounded very different from what she had feared. You lived with humans all this time? The Queen asked. Lyriana nodded. Yes. The Queen glanced at the children again. And these two... Lyriana's expression softened. They were born in that colony. The court grew even quieter. They grew up there, the princess continued, and they have known me their entire lives. Queen Aralyth slowly realized something. The children were not simply companions who had traveled with the princess. They were family. Lyriana gently placed her hands on the children's shoulders. They call me Mother. The words filled the throne hall with stunned silence. For a moment, even the powerful Queen Aralyth struggled to respond. Her lost daughter had returned after 10 years, but she had not returned alone. She had returned as something else, not just a princess of Veloria, but the mother of 2 human children. The throne hall remained quiet after Princess Lyriana finished speaking. Many nobles looked confused while others stared at the 2 human children with curiosity. It was difficult for the court to imagine that the missing princess of Veloria had spent 10 years living on a distant planet with humans. For the Velorian Empire, royal family members usually lived protected lives inside powerful cities and advanced starships. The idea that a princess had survived on a remote colony far away from royal protection sounded almost unbelievable. Queen Aralyth slowly walked closer to her daughter. The Queen's expression had changed from shock to deep curiosity. She wanted to understand everything that had happened during the years her daughter had been missing. What kind of world was it? The Queen asked gently. Lyriana looked toward the large palace windows as she remembered the distant planet. It was not like Veloria, she said calmly. The environment was harsh and unpredictable. Large storms often crossed the surface, and the colony had to work together every day just to survive. The court listened carefully as she continued. When my escape pod crashed, I believed I would die there. The air was thin, and the land around the crash site was rocky and cold. My emergency supplies would not have lasted more than a few days. She paused for a moment before speaking again. But the humans found me before that happened. Lyriana explained that a group of human explorers had discovered her damaged escape pod while searching the nearby mountains. They had been part of a small, independent colony built by travelers, scientists, and families who wanted to create a peaceful community far from the conflicts of larger empires. "They carried me back to their settlement," she said. "At the time, they did not know who I was. To them, I was simply someone who needed help." Queen Aralyth watched her daughter carefully. "And when they discovered you were a Velorian princess?" she asked. Lyriana gave a small smile. "They did not treat me differently." Several nobles in the hall looked surprised by that answer. In many civilizations, the discovery of royal blood would immediately change how someone was treated. A princess was normally surrounded by protection and strict rules of diplomacy. But the humans had apparently behaved in another way. "They asked about my injuries before they asked about my title," Lyriana explained. "They were more concerned about whether I could walk again than where I came from." The queen slowly folded her hands together as she listened. "What was this colony called?" she asked. "The settlement was known as Haven Ridge," Lyriana replied. "It was small but strong. Humans and a few other refugees lived there together." The word refugees caused another wave of whispers among the court. Lyriana nodded when she noticed their reaction. "Yes," she continued. "The colony was built by people who had lost their homes in different conflicts across the galaxy. Some were humans who had left crowded worlds looking for peace. Others were survivors from destroyed settlements." The princess explained that Haven Ridge was not ruled by kings or emperors. Instead, the colony operated through cooperation. Each family helped maintain the settlement, repaired equipment, grew food, and protected the community from dangers. "There were engineers, doctors, farmers, and explorers," she said. "Everyone had a role." Queen Aralyth listened with growing interest. "And you lived among them?" Lyriana nodded. "At first I stayed because I had no way to leave. My escape pod was destroyed, and the colony did not have long-distance communication equipment strong enough to contact Veloria." She looked down briefly before continuing. "But even after I recovered from my injuries, I chose to stay." The court grew quiet again. Lyriana explained that during the first year she had learned how to live in a way she had never experienced before. Instead of royal ceremonies and palace walls, her days were filled with real work, and she helped repair water systems, assisted the colony doctor, and joined exploration teams that searched for new resources across the planet. The humans never treated her as a fragile royal figure. They treated her as a member of the community. Over time, the colony became her home. It was during those years that she met two human settlers who would later become the parents of the children now standing beside her. "They were brave people," Lyriana said softly, "kind and patient. They taught me how humans build families even in the hardest places." But several years later, tragedy struck the colony. A dangerous illness spread through part of the settlement. Despite the colony doctor's efforts, many people became sick. Among those who died were the parents of the two children. Lyriana gently placed her hands on Eli and Mara's shoulders again. "They were very young when it happened," she said quietly. The throne hall remained silent. "They had no family left in the colony," Lyriana continued, "and the settlement council asked if I would care for them." Queen Aralyth understood immediately. "You became their mother?" Lyriana nodded. "Yes." The princess explained that raising the children changed her life completely. The colony helped her, of course, but Eli and Mara quickly became part of her daily world. She taught them how to read, how to explore the forests around the settlement, and how to work with the other families in Haven Ridge. "They grew up believing that helping others is more important than power," she said calmly. Queen Aralyth slowly looked at the two children again. The boy stood confidently while the little girl held Lyriana's hand tightly, but watched the throne hall with curious eyes. For 10 years, the queen had believed her daughter had been lost in space. Instead, she had been building a life on a distant planet. surrounded by people who valued cooperation more than titles. But as the queen prepared to speak again, Lyriana added one final sentence. "And there is something else you must know." The entire court listened carefully. "The attack that destroyed my ship was not an accident." The room suddenly became tense. Lyriana's voice grew more serious. "The same raiders who attacked us years ago have been searching for royal targets across this region." She looked directly at the queen. "And if they discover I have returned to Veloria?" She paused for a moment. "So they may come here next." The throne hall of Veloria became tense after Princess Lyriana revealed that the attack on her ship had not been random. The nobles who had been quietly listening to her story now began whispering nervously among themselves. If raiders had truly been targeting royal ships across the region, then the return of the missing princess could create new danger for the Empire. The Velorian Empire had powerful fleets and advanced defenses, but the thought that unknown enemies had once attacked the royal heir was deeply troubling. Queen Aralyth raised one hand, and the whispers inside the hall quickly stopped. Her attention returned to her daughter, and her voice remained calm even though the information was serious. "You believe these raiders may still be searching for you?" the queen asked. Lyriana nodded slowly. "Yes, but the colony where I lived has faced them before." That sentence immediately caught the attention of several military advisors standing near the throne. A small human colony surviving attacks from organized raiders sounded unusual. Most remote settlements without strong defenses rarely lasted long against such threats. Queen Aralyth noticed the concern on the faces of her advisors. "You said the colony was peaceful," she said. "How could it defend itself against raiders?" Lyriana gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Because humans protect their home in ways many empires do not expect." The princess began explaining more about Haven Ridge, the small human settlement where she had lived for the past 10 years. The colony was not large and did not have massive warships like the Velorian Empire. Instead, it had something very different. The people of Haven Ridge worked together constantly to survive the difficult environment of their world. Over time, they had built strong systems of cooperation. Engineers repaired machines that others depended on. Farmers grew food not only for their own families, but for the entire settlement. Scouts traveled across the planet to map dangerous areas and warn the colony about incoming storms or wildlife threats. The colony had no kings or royal families. Every person had a responsibility to help protect the community. "At first I thought the colony was too small to survive long," Lyriana admitted. "But I quickly learned something important about humans." The nobles listened carefully. "Humans do not rely only on powerful leaders or armies. They rely on each other." She explained that when the first raider ships appeared near the planet several years ago, the colony did not panic. Instead, the settlers worked together calmly. They used small defense ships, hidden monitoring stations, and clever communication systems to track the raiders' movements. Most importantly, they did not try to fight alone. The human settlers had quietly built relationships with other nearby colonies and small civilizations. When danger appeared, those partners helped warn each other and share resources. This network of cooperation allowed Haven Ridge to survive threats that would have destroyed a normal, isolated settlement. "They built alliances without empires," Lyriana said. Queen Aralyth listened closely to every word. "You are describing something unusual," the queen replied. "Most civilizations build power through territory and fleets." Lyriana nodded. "Yes, but humans often build power through connections." The princess explained that human explorers and traders often traveled between distant colonies, helping different worlds communicate and cooperate. These connections slowly created a network of communities that trusted one another. It was not an empire, but it was strong in another way. "If one colony is attacked," Lyriana continued, "others send warnings or assistance." The Velorian military advisors looked at each other with interest. A decentralized network like that could become surprisingly resilient against enemies who expected to fight a single centralized government. Lyriana continued telling the story of Haven Ridge. Over the years, she had watched humans solve problems in ways that surprised her. Instead of focusing only on technology or weapons, they focused on people. They believed strong communities created stronger defenses. When the raiders appeared near the planet, the colony had not waited helplessly for rescue. Instead, they had prepared quietly, using knowledge of the planet's terrain and communication networks to stay one step ahead of the attackers. The raiders eventually gave up searching the region because the colony never allowed them to gain a clear advantage. Queen Aralyth slowly walked around the throne platform as she considered everything she had heard. "You lived among them for 10 years, she said. "Yes." "And during that time you raised these children." Lyriana looked down at Eli and Mara again. "They are part of that community," she said softly. "Just as I became part of it." The queen studied the two children carefully. They did not appear frightened by the royal court or the attention surrounding them. Instead, they looked curious and calm, as if they trusted the adults around them to keep them safe. Queen Aralyth realized something important in that moment. Her daughter had not simply survived on a distant world. She had learned something new about the galaxy. But before the queen could continue asking questions, one of the palace defense officers hurried into the throne hall. He bowed quickly before speaking. "Your Majesty, our orbital sensors have detected several unidentified ships approaching the outer system." The court immediately became alert. The officer continued. "And they are not Velorian vessels." Queen Aralyth's voice became firm. "Identify them!" The officer looked at his scanner tablet. "The ships are broadcasting a signal." The hall waited. "They identify themselves as human vessels from Haven Ridge." The officer looked up. "They say they came to make sure the princess reached home safely." A new silence filled the throne hall. Because the human colony had not simply sent Lyriana back alone, they had come with her. The throne hall of Veloria grew tense after the palace officer finished speaking. The news that several human ships had entered the outer system surprised many members of the court. It was not common for an unknown fleet to approach the capital world of the Velorian Empire without long diplomatic preparation. Even though the officer had said the ships belonged to the same human colony where Princess Lyriana had lived, the royal advisors immediately began discussing the possible risks. Queen Aralyth remained calm as she turned toward the officer. "How many ships have arrived?" she asked. The officer looked down at his scanner tablet before answering. "6 vessels, Your Majesty. They are small compared to our battle cruisers, but they appear well equipped. They are currently holding position near the outer orbital defense line and waiting for permission to approach." Several military advisors stepped forward to examine the information. Veloria's defense systems were some of the most advanced in the region, and any fleet entering the system would normally be scanned and identified immediately. The reports showed that the human ships were not displaying aggressive formations. Their weapons were inactive, and their flight paths suggested they were waiting patiently for instructions. Queen Aralyth turned back toward her daughter. "Did you expect them to follow you here?" she asked. Princess Lyriana nodded slightly. "Yes," she replied. "The colony leaders insisted on escorting me back. They believed it was safer that way." The queen considered this carefully. In most royal situations, an escort from another civilization might be seen as suspicious or even disrespectful. But Lyriana's calm tone suggested that the humans meant no harm. "Why did they believe it was necessary?" the queen asked. Lyriana took a slow breath before answering. "Because the raiders who attacked my ship years ago have not disappeared." The hall grew quiet again as the princess continued. "The colony detected their signals several times during the past few years. The raiders have been searching different systems for valuable targets. Royal families are especially attractive to them because they believe capturing a ruler or heir can force powerful empires into difficult negotiations. Several Velorian military officers exchanged serious looks. Raiders who hunted royal targets were not ordinary pirates. They were often well-organized groups who relied on surprise attacks and careful intelligence gathering. Lyriana continued explaining. When the colony learned I planned to return to Veloria, they feared the raiders might eventually discover the same information. If that happened, they could try to attack again. The queen slowly folded her hands together. So the humans decided to protect you themselves? Yes. Lyriana looked toward the large palace windows where the bright sky of Veloria could be seen above the city. They said that if someone tries to harm their family, they do not simply hope the danger disappears. The Velorian nobles listened carefully. They prepare. At that moment, another palace officer hurried into the hall. He carried new sensor reports from the Orbital Defense Command. Your Majesty, the officer said respectfully, the human ships are requesting communication with the palace. Queen Aralyth nodded. Open the channel. Within seconds, a large holographic display appeared in the center of the throne hall. The glowing projection formed the image of a human command bridge. Several officers could be seen standing near control stations, but one figure stepped forward to speak. The man looked calm and confident. His uniform was simple, similar to the clothing Lyriana had described from the Haven Ridge colony. Greetings from Haven Ridge, the man said politely. My name is Captain Aaron Hale. We escorted Princess Lyriana to Veloria to make sure she arrived safely. The court watched the hologram with interest. Human commanders were rarely seen inside Velorian royal halls. Queen Aralyth spoke clearly. You have entered the territory of the Velorian Empire. Explain your intentions. Captain Hale nodded respectfully. Our ships will not approach the capital unless invited, he said. We only wish to confirm that the princess has returned safely to her family. The queen studied the hologram carefully. The captain's voice contained no sign of fear or arrogance. He simply sounded professional. Why did you believe such protection was necessary? The queen asked. The captain's expression became serious. Because the raiders who attacked her ship are still active. He activated a data display beside him. Several star maps appeared on the holographic screen showing different regions of space. Our scouts have tracked the raider group for years, he explained. They move from system to system searching for wealthy targets. Recently, we intercepted signals suggesting they may be approaching this region again. The Velorian military advisors quickly studied the maps. Captain Hale continued. If they learn the lost princess has returned to Veloria, they might attempt another attack. We wanted to make sure the princess reached safety before that happened. The court remained silent as they absorbed this information. Finally, Queen Aralyth spoke again. You crossed several systems to protect my daughter. Captain Hale answered calmly. She is part of our family, too. Those words surprised many nobles. It was unusual to hear a foreign commander speak about a royal princess in such personal terms. Lyriana stepped forward beside the holographic display. The people of Haven Ridge protected me when I had nothing, she said softly. They protected these children when they lost their parents. For them, family is not defined by species. Queen Aralyth looked at her daughter, then at the human captain's image. And in that moment, the queen began understanding something important about the humans her daughter had lived with for so long. They had not escorted Lyriana to Veloria because of political alliances or royal rewards. They had come because they believed protecting family was simply the right thing to do. And that belief was about to create a powerful new connection between two very different worlds. The throne hall remained quiet after Captain Aaron Hale finished speaking through the holographic display. The Velorian nobles were not used to hearing such direct and simple explanations from foreign commanders. In most diplomatic situations, visiting leaders spoke with careful political language, often hiding their real intentions behind formal words. But the human captain had spoken with calm honesty. He had not asked for permission to stay, nor had he demanded rewards for protecting the princess. He had simply explained that the people of Haven Ridge came to ensure the safety of someone they considered family. Queen Aralyth studied the holographic image for a moment before responding. "Your colony traveled a long distance to protect my daughter," she said carefully. "The Velorian Empire does not forget acts of loyalty." Captain Hale gave a small, respectful nod. "We did not do it for recognition, Your Majesty. We did it because it was the right thing to do." Those words echoed softly across the throne hall. Some Velorian nobles looked surprised by the simplicity of the answer. For many civilizations, protecting a royal heir from another empire would normally involve long negotiations or expectations of future political benefits. Yet the humans appeared uninterested in such arrangements. Princess Lyriana stepped closer to the holographic display, her expression calm but warm. "This is how humans think," she explained to the court. "When someone becomes part of their community, they do not abandon them." Queen Aralyth turned toward her daughter again. During the past few hours, she had learned more about humans than in the many years of trade reports and diplomatic briefings she had previously read. The Queen had always believed power came from strong fleets, advanced technology, and centuries of political influence. But the story her daughter was telling suggested something different. Human strength did not always appear in the form of massive warships or large empires. Sometimes it appeared in the form of loyalty. One of the Velorian military commanders stepped forward and addressed the hologram. "Captain Hale, our sensors show that your ships are not heavily armed. If these raiders are truly dangerous, why would your colony risk confronting them with such small vessels?" The human captain smiled slightly. "Because we are not alone," he answered. Several new signals suddenly appeared on the palace display screens as the Velorian Defense Network updated its data. The orbital sensors had detected additional vessels entering the outer regions of the star system. At first, the military officers believed it might be the raiders Lyriana had warned about, but the identification codes told a different story. The incoming ships were broadcasting human communication signals, not just from Haven Ridge, from several nearby colonies. Captain Hale continued explaining as the new fleet positions appeared on the holographic map. "The people of Haven Ridge maintain communication with many other settlements across this region," he said. "When we left to escort the princess, we informed our neighbors about the possible danger." Queen Aralyth watched the growing number of ships appearing on the display. "These vessels came to help you?" she asked. "Yes," the captain replied. "Not because we asked them to fight, but because they believe protecting peaceful worlds is worth the effort." Within minutes, the Palace Defense Command confirmed the information. Multiple small human fleets had arrived near Veloria's outer orbital zones. None of them showed hostile activity. Instead, they positioned themselves in quiet defensive formations far away from the capital planet. And the Velorian military officers quickly understood what was happening. The humans had not brought a massive war fleet. They had brought a network of allies. Each group of ships belonged to a different independent settlement or trade colony. Alone, they were not powerful enough to challenge a large empire, but together they formed a protective shield across the outer system. Queen Aralyth slowly walked toward the large palace window that overlooked the city skyline. Far above the atmosphere, dozens of small ships could now be seen moving through the bright sky as Veloria's orbital sensors tracked the new arrivals. The Queen spoke quietly. "They came without being ordered." Captain Hale nodded. "Humans are used to helping each other survive difficult situations," he explained. Many of our colonies began as small communities trying to live peacefully far from large empires. When one settlement faces danger, others often assist. Princess Lyriana gently placed her hand on Eli's shoulder while Mara stood close beside her. "This is what I learned during the years I lived among them," she said softly. "Human strength does not always look like power." The queen turned back toward her daughter. "What does it look like?" she asked. Lyriana smiled slightly. "It looks like people choosing to stand together." The Velorian court watched the conversation carefully. For centuries, their empire had believed strength came from hierarchy and command structures, where orders moved from rulers to fleets and armies. The idea that dozens of independent groups would travel across star systems simply to help protect one family member was something many nobles had never considered before. Queen Aralyth finally spoke again to the human captain. "Captain Hale, the Velorian Empire will remember this act of loyalty." The human commander nodded politely. "We are glad the princess is home," he replied. As the communication link ended, the throne hall slowly returned to quiet conversation. Yet the atmosphere inside the palace had changed. The return of the princess had not only reunited a mother and daughter, it had introduced the Velorian Empire to a new understanding of power, a strength built not only on fleets and empires, but on trust, loyalty, and cooperation. And the people of Veloria were about to discover that this kind of strength could shape the future of the entire galaxy. The arrival of the human ships around the Veloria system created a moment that many historians would later describe as the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. At first, the Velorian military command had watched the incoming vessels with caution. Their sensors carefully tracked every movement, ensuring that none of the ships showed hostile behavior. But as the hours passed, it became clear that the human fleets had no intention of threatening the Empire. They remained positioned far from the capital world, forming a quiet protective presence rather than an invading force. Inside the royal palace, the throne hall slowly returned to calm after the intense discussions. The nobles who had once stared at the human children with confusion were now studying them with curiosity and respect. Eli and Mara had remained close to Princess Lyriana the entire time, quietly observing everything around them. Even though they were surrounded by an enormous palace and powerful alien leaders, they did not appear frightened. Instead, they seemed calm, as if they trusted the adults around them to keep them safe. Queen Aralyth watched the two children carefully. For many years, she had believed her daughter was lost forever, somewhere in deep space. Now Lyriana had returned not only alive but changed in ways the queen had never expected. The young princess who once explored the palace gardens had become a strong woman who had survived hardship on a distant world and built a family far from royal protection. And the queen slowly stepped closer to the children. "You have traveled a long way," she said gently. Eli nodded politely. "Yes, Your Majesty." His voice was calm but respectful. Mara stayed close beside Lyriana but gave the queen a small, curious smile. Queen Aralyth looked at her daughter again. "These children are important to you," she said. Lyriana nodded without hesitation. "They are my family." The queen was silent for a moment. Velorian royal traditions were strict, and the idea of a princess raising children from another species would normally create complicated political discussions. But the queen had already learned something important during this long day. Her daughter had survived because strangers chose to help her. Those strangers had protected the children when they lost their parents. And now those same people had traveled across star systems to make sure the princess returned home safely. The queen finally spoke with a calm voice that carried across the throne hall. "Then they are welcome here." The nobles listened carefully as she continued. "From this day forward, Eli and Mara will be recognized as members of the Velorian royal family." A wave of quiet surprise moved through the court. This was not a small decision. Royal recognition meant the children would receive protection, education, and respect within the empire. But Queen Aralyth's voice remained steady. "Our empire is strong because we adapt and learn," she said. "These children represent the courage and loyalty that brought my daughter home." Princess Lyriana smiled warmly as Eli and Mara looked up at her in surprise, and the queen then turned toward her advisors. "Prepare a diplomatic message to the human colonies that assisted my daughter," she ordered. "Tell them the Velorian Empire wishes to begin formal cooperation with their settlements." The advisors immediately began discussing plans. Trade routes, research exchanges, and security cooperation were all possibilities that could grow from this moment. Far above the planet, the human ships still waited quietly in orbit. When the message from the palace reached Captain Aaron Hale, he read it carefully and then looked out through the bridge window at the bright world below. "Well," one of his officers said with a small smile, "that worked out better than we expected." Captain Hale nodded. "Sometimes the best alliances begin with simple acts of kindness," he replied. Back in the throne hall, Queen Aralyth walked beside her daughter as the court slowly began to disperse. For the first time in many years, the palace felt alive again. The sadness that had filled its halls after the princess disappeared was finally replaced by something new: hope. Lyriana looked toward the tall windows where the sky of Veloria glowed with the light of distant ships. "Mother," she said softly, "the galaxy is changing." Queen Aralyth nodded slowly. "Yes," the queen replied, "and thanks to the people who helped you survive, Veloria will be part of that future." In the years that followed, the story of the lost princess spread across many star systems. Civilizations heard about the Velorian heir who vanished for a decade and returned home holding the hands of 2 human children. But the story was remembered for more than just the mystery of her disappearance. It became a symbol of something greater. It reminded the galaxy that the strongest connections between worlds were not built only by empires or powerful fleets. Sometimes they were built by simple choices. Choices to help strangers, choices to protect family, and choices to stand together even when the universe felt uncertain. Because on the day the lost princess returned to Veloria, the galaxy learned an important lesson about humanity. Their greatest strength was not their technology or their ships, it was their compassion.